10 years into our marriage, I became very wealthy thanks to the percentage of ownership I had in my father's company. So I bought my loyal and lovely wife a mansion for us to live in, which came with a butler who was prepared to take care of all the undesirable chores. My work schedule was pretty spontaneous because I could visit the office as I pleased or work from home. Our marriage and life together for the next 20 years after that were blissful. Other than some odd moments and occurrences. One day I arrived home from work to find the butler with my wife, standing side by side doing dishes. She was drying the easier part, but I didn't understand why she was willingly doing any of the chores and standing so close to him. Their elbows touched a few times and I coughed to let them know I was there. My wife jumped, but he just moved away from her a little bit. She said she felt bad. He was in here all by himself. So she wanted to keep him company and help a bit. She was so cheery and warm. I couldn't tell if she had any ill intentions. Another time I came home to find her lounging in the pool with the butler, gardening and staring at her. They laughed a few times before I came out to greet them. It was clear that they were at least friends, but I didn't like how friendly they were. I thought I was just being controlling and jealous. So I accepted that my wife was friends with and cared about the butler. What was the harm in that if I trusted my wife of 17-ish years? At this point, we spent every moment I wasn't busy together. I loved her and I could tell she loved me yet. Another odd occurrence was when I walked upstairs to find the butler closing our bedroom door. It had been hours since I was upstairs because my wife was still sleeping. It was odd and I asked him if she called for him. He jumped when I spoke and turned around sheepishly. Although I could tell he wanted to act normal. He stammered and said she called to ask him for some water. I accepted that for a moment but reminded him that he was not to enter our bedroom or open the door. He didn't know what to say besides, "Yes, sir." He walked away quickly and I opened the door to find my wife in her panties, drinking water. I asked her if the butler saw her like that and she said, "No, she just took off her robe again." I was skeptical. I was heavily considering hiring a new butler. It seemed like she was flirty with him at least. And I didn't like that. He was most likely in our bedroom with my wife in her panties before I could terminate him. I saw him smelling my wife's panties. I know it's really bad. Really ballsy. I caught him on the security camera. I told him that was unacceptable and made my wife really uncomfortable. I didn't even tell her about it. But when I told him she was uncomfortable, he instantly looked like he didn't believe me. That ticked me off. I told him he was fired. I hired someone else this time, a female maid, since I knew my wife was straight. I decided that even if I was jealous and protective, it was a smart decision. 1 week later, I arrived home to find the maid outside gardening. I went upstairs and found the butler. I fired coming out of our bedroom once again, except this time he was dressed in regular but still kind of formal clothes. He looked at me like he was amused but inconvenienced because I was there and saw him. I asked him what he was doing in my house again and he told me my wife hired him for something else. He said it with such nerve. All I wanted to do was punch his smug face. I told him to leave and not to come back no matter what. My wife told him as she walked away. I went into the bedroom and found my wife wearing a skimpy little nightgown. I asked her what was happening and she looked nervous. She said I was home earlier today than the week before. And I told her she always knew my schedule was spontaneous and not to change the subject. She turned red and told me I was freaking out over nothing. I asked her why she couldn't explain why she was here in her skimpy nightgown after the butler I fired just came out of the room. She was pretty stunned and said she hired him back for things around the house. The maid couldn't handle. I asked if one of those things was helping her with her personal plumbing and lubrication. Her jaw dropped and she couldn't look me in the eye. Her cheeks must have been burning. They were so red. It looked like blood vessels in her face were showing up. It was crazy. Her face never turned that red in all the 30 years we were together. She finally said in a weak voice that if he did help her with that, it was nothing against me. I told her that it most definitely was against me because she belonged to me. We were life partners and only I was permitted to help her with her plumbing and lubrication. She said she wouldn't ask him to help her again, and asked me not to worry about it anymore. I asked if that meant she was admitting to sleeping with him and she was silent. She nodded. Yes, very minimally with her eyes watering. Then she started speaking really fast about how it didn't matter. She just considered it a job. Nothing meaningful that would take away from our marriage, and she needed me to forget about it so that nothing changed between us. I told her this was most certainly going to change things between us and it already took everything away from our marriage. I told her we were over, called her a name and told her to get out of my home. I was extremely careful to get a post not signed after I came into more money. It's not that I didn't trust my wife at the time. It was because my father and I were lawyers, which means I couldn't ever be made the fool. So my wife sorrowfully packed her bags. She had too many bags for someone with nowhere to go. The butler came to pick her up in the car he afforded with the paychecks I gave him. They stayed in a motel where the butler had been staying after I fired him. My wife had so many belongings, clothes, that she had to leave some of it behind, which I immediately told the maid to sell on eBay or keep for herself. They stayed in that motel as long as they could, but their money ran out without me signing the checks. They tried to contact me individually, blaming each other for what occurred and asking me to take them back into the mansion. It was gratifying that they were turning on each other and failing to survive or do anything with their lives. Even to this day, my ex still tries to ask me for help and gives me some updated sob stories about where she is in life. It is not glamorous. It's far from what she was accustomed to with me. I've become something like Bruce Wayne in town and I have no complaints even though her betrayal hurt. I knew from the moment I found out that I could recover from it. Not because of my money but because I know what love is, and it wasn't that I am sorry your wife couldn't see what a great life she had with you. I honestly feel like the attention and sexual tension she experienced with the butler was too much for her immature brain to handle. It was a man in close proximity to her that she shouldn't sleep with. No matter how much he would have been willing. He obviously paid her attention. And when their friendship developed, she couldn't keep her legs closed. I believe she was egotistical and materialistic and didn't have the respect she should for her providing and loyal husband. What this type of woman needs to understand is that resisting temptation pays off in the end. No man should be able to convince them to disrespect themselves and their spouses by breaking their vows and trust. I'm not sure what happened in your wife's head, but we are all here for you to offer support. Now, let's get into our second story for today. One fateful day when my wife went to work, she forgot her phone. I took the opportunity to check it and was appalled by what I found. I should have known what was going on because my wife, 25, was extremely excited about going to work. Suddenly, she said it was because she became in charge of a business task that she really enjoyed. It was something like designing different abstract images each day for a newsletter. I, 28, believed her. She was a good girl and I was proud of her for earning us additional income for living expenses. The only other dead giveaway was that she didn't want to have sex as often. But then I knew why. It was because she was sexting with a coworker, sending pictures and talking about the sex they had. It was disgusting. I drove to her work immediately. I backed up all the stuff for her phone because although she wasn't getting it back, it was going to be deactivated. I brought it with me and started by showing the receptionist, who I only met once before. Then I asked her if I could get a guest pass to go have lunch with my wife. She giggled and gave me one. She knew I was sarcastically infuriated and this was going to be a heck of a show. She followed me in putting up a "be back in 5 minutes" sign that she scribbled out. Everyone looked up from their desks to see me. I must have looked determined and angry. I asked everyone to gather around and they did. I said I had some news to share about somewhere they all knew. Well, they were all sparkly-eyed with gossip, endorphins, when they found out who I was talking about. People started looking around for AP, and my wife AP came out of the bathroom just then, and we all looked at him. I announced that there was a guy who had the audacity to sleep with my wife. Some of the coworkers started shouting out insults at him. Among these, he was called despicable. Just then my wife's head peeked out of her office. When she saw everyone looking at her, she went back inside and shut the door. Now everyone knew what my wife and AP looked like naked. Some girls whispered that they knew something was going on between them. Co-workers took the time to print /draw signs that said slanderous insults and taped them on my wife's office door. I thanked them for their creativity and left wondering where the boss was that allowed all this to happen. When my wife got back to the house, I already had the locks changed. She took the stuff I let her have to AP's house. They both quit their jobs that day and walked out shamefully. In our town, there was just one major employer for like half the population. So when I shared with people the things my wife talked about and took pictures of, everyone in the area knew about it or saw it. It didn't take long for them to decide to move about 500 miles west. I couldn't have asked for a better outcome since she moved out of state. Our divorce was made final through the mail. She didn't ask me for anything. Thank God. But I would have been able to prove her infidelity anyway. She was done with me and the embarrassing past she was trying to forget. I felt the same way about her and couldn't be happier with the choice I made. I am sorry your wife behaved like an untrustworthy office cheater. It's hard to get as low as a person who cheats on their spouse while utilizing their trust to earn income for the family. What are they even working for? If not to improve the life they have at home. If they honestly believe the person they start an affair with at work or anywhere is better than the spouse they have at home, they're wrong. The grass may seem greener on the other side. Finding a person with a new set of features, issues, habits, goals and interests is completely unnecessary. It is only a shame when a marriage or union ends because one spouse thought they found better in someone else or just thought they could effortlessly manage two serious relationships. Really. The only grounds for divorce, the proper way to end a marriage, is when one person absolutely cannot or will not honestly communicate with the other person. Thank you for sharing this story. I appreciate your bravery and bold confrontation. Thank you for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also comment below with your thoughts on what happened.